So what will be the day schedule for these kids?
This is going to be a 2-week program. It's going to be held at the Outward Bound School in the ACT, and instead of being stuck in a classroom or a university, our young people will be out all over the joint. And we're going to be developing this new style of learning, this very interactive style of learning. So if we need to learn about darkness, we'll go into a cave with the lights out and have a whole session on what happens when we run out of power. Do you get the point?
That's a
remarkable
illustration, actually. Yeah,
when we're talking about what happens when the sea level rises, I'm going to get them all on lilos out into a lake where their feet don't touch the ground, just with their bathers on, and say, now let's talk about when all of our shores are inundated from what happens at the melting polar caps.
These practical illustrations are really very much like the way the Inuit in the Arctic survive. They're opportunistic in the sense of, gee, it's a good day today, we'll do such and such.
Yeah, yeah, and as Don Willans, the Everest mountaineer, who never trained before an Everest expedition, just smoked and whereas all the other guys were super fit and rolled up, they never made the summit because they were burnt out beforehand. And his philosophy was, mate, you just get fit doing it. And this is the same approach from the learning perspective. You get your whole idea of it fit to shape by doing it, not just hearing about it. You know the old story, what we hear, we remember, 10% of what we hear, 20% of what we see, but we remember 100% of what we do, because our whole body is invested in the learning. So if we can learn with the whole body, get left and right brain happening together, then we actually begin to understand rather than just memorise.
So we don't always have to be totally prepared to go into something or make a decision about something. We do it with our intuition.
What we have to do is develop young people who are resilient and courageous and able to face whatever's turning up and say, here's a challenge, how do we deal with it? Not how do we ignore it, how do we deny it, how do we look the other way? That's how we've been doing it until now, but that's got to change.
That's the Inuit, in fact, their culture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They deal with what is. So if the man goes hunting and the ice breaks up behind him and he's stuck somewhere else, he's stuck somewhere else. So he hunts there and he stays there until the ice hardens.
The teenagers who take part in the Arctic Climate Leadership Challenge will be reporting to the world on their scientific and cultural discoveries. Using computers, they will be filing electronic journals on a daily basis.
The science component is critical. Some of them are going to be going up into the Arctic to undertake some very high quality field science work. So an understanding of teamwork, toughness, resilience, survival, matched with a really good understanding of the climate change science is what these kids will end up with at the end of the field university. So we'll be utilising some really high quality science programs which have been tailored for these kids so that they end up with a really good framework of understanding. Because the science is changing so rapidly, for example, in the Arctic, they can't predict the ice melt anymore because they don't have the computer models to do it. So these kids need a framework of understanding, and on top of that framework they can then build their knowledge. Plus we'll have a lot of speakers, and I've got one guy to come down. He was the first guy to circumnavigate Greenland, an Australian, believe it or not. It took him 4 years, he and another guy, in kayaks and dog sledges.
And yeah, this is before the ice melted.
Yeah. So to have a bloke like that come in and talk to the kids, he's also been doing some recent work with the superglacial lakes on the ice cap itself in Greenland. So he brings that real up-to-date science and experience that, that's what changes people's lives. To meet the people who do it, say, I could do that. So we've got access to quite a lot of really exciting speakers who can just illuminate the whole process for these kids.
Previous expedition, De Blonville and his team came close to perishing on Desperation Island, a rock in the Arctic. They lived for 5 days without food, without tents, their clothing wet and their kayaks bolted to the rock while 180-kilometre winds howled over them. During that time, they developed a survival attitude that took them through. They disregarded their mistake of choosing a rock that was barely above water during high tides and storms.
Our young people can do lots of training, but really what they need to get is an attitude. The attitude is, it is going to change. We can handle whatever turns up because we have faith in ourselves. Let's face facts. We can't change them, but what we can do is adapt and make new plans. And that, as a species, is how we are hardwired.